Hello. Thank you for joining me once again as I am continuing the reading of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. We are in Chapter 14, and this is Chapter 14, Part 2. Thank you for all that are taking the time to listen, to return to listen. Thank you for the new subscribers, and thank you for the old subscribers who are continuing to listen. I am very grateful. So, without further ado, let's continue on with the reading of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. We are on page 218 at the part of Stay tuned to this channel. Okay? Stay tuned to this channel. Something similar to following ascended masters is channeling or going to a channeler. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, channeling is what occurs when a living person allows an out-of-body, disincarnate being or spirit guide to possess the person's body and mind and provide information. The channeled information is generally given through speech, although it can be writing. When people channel, their goal is usually to channel higher consciousness, disincarnate beings like ascended masters, spirit guides, and etc. First, let me say that truth is truth wherever you find it. We should listen to wisdom whether it comes from a wise man or a fool or a channeler. And it can and does come from all the above. So if the information you have received from a channeler is positive and true, give the wisdom the respect it deserves. With that in mind, let's take a broad look at the limitations and serious problems of channeling. Channeling has become very popular. And I know that some of you reading this won't want to hear about any problems with it. But the ancient teachings do point out some things that should be carefully considered. For one, when you reach a certain level of growth on your spiritual path, channeling is outgrown. And if you have an open mind, the common sense and truth revealed in the ancient teachings will shed new light on the entire field of channeling, allowing you to consider some new facts and make up your own mind. So please hear me out with an open mind and then decide. The phenomenon that is called channeling can actually be several very different things. Number one, someone channeling an actual disincarnate being. Number two, someone believing they are actually channeling a disincarnate being, but they are actually channeling information from the inner being. Number three, someone believing they are actually channeling a disincarnate being, but they are actually channeling information from their subconscious mind. And number four, someone totally faking it. Let's start by looking at number 2 and 3. Some people really do channel disincarnate beings. Others just think they are channeling a higher consciousness being, but they are actually only accessing their own inner being. Now, this isn't necessarily bad. In fact, it can be safer and yield truer information than channeling a disincarnate being. Here's how it works. The channeler wants to and believes they are going to channel a disincarnate being. But for some reason, this doesn't really happen, yet they think it does. Instead, what really happens is that they are being protected by their inner being or the hierarchy, and their subconscious creates a guide or ascended master in their mind in order to realize their desire to access higher information by channeling. But the information is really coming from the inner being and or their subconscious. For centuries, hypnosis have known about the incredible power of the mind to create the most elaborate stories and scenarios while in a trance. In fact, while some past life regressions are quite real, others are pure fabrications by the subconscious mind, down to details like the stitching in a suit. In part, this phenomenon works via the power of assumption or power of belief. See chapter on that subject. Linked with a strong desire to please the hypnotist or therapist. You can also see this phenomenon at work in both ways with the use of an oracle, like a pendulum, for instance, when people believe a pendulum will give them answers from a higher source. It might, as long as they really believe it. It will even work for a skeptic, as long as the skeptic's subconscious mind believes it. In any case, it's not the pendulum itself that is doing it. It is the user's belief that the pendulum does or is being guided or gives them access, which actually gives them access. Yet, oracles and the types of channeling we are talking about right now are in between mediums, substitutes for being able to more directly and more precisely, more purely get information from the inner being or the subconscious. So, both the oracle user and this type of channeler use their beliefs in their methods to access information from inside themselves. Information that they don't believe they have access to otherwise. Therein lies one of the problems. Using the method that can actually reinforce the belief and programming that the individual can't access the information more directly. And that is a major spiritual limitation to place upon yourself. We'll discuss that more in a moment. As we have established, the type of channeling we are discussing can access information from either the subconscious or the inner being. But it generally mixes the two, and therein lies another problem. You can get inaccurate information that you believe is accurate. It can be partly true, but distorted by the subconscious mind's programming. That's because subconscious programming and possible dark outside influences can filter, distort, and even totally block out the true and accurate information coming from the inner being. I have heard good channeled information, but it wasn't as good or clear as it could be because the consciousness of the person and because of their subconscious programming. But there are times when it's not just a matter of how good the information is. The subconscious and conscious beliefs of a person using an oracle or channeling can seriously taint information and cause a serious misguidance. And if serious life decisions are based on such channeled or divined misinformation, a person can make serious mistakes in life that affect both themselves and others. Zayn found me using an oracle one day and told me the following. Using oracles and such is fine at a certain level of consciousness, a certain level of spiritual awareness and evolution. There are protections from on high for the novice who is sincere and has a good heart. A spiritual innocent is watched over by spiritual guardians, just as human adults watch over human children. But just like when a human child gets older, you expect them to be more aware and responsible about life. Our hierarchical guardians expect the same of us as spiritual children. Thus, as you spiritually grow, you must become far more discreet and cautious. If you make a mistake at a higher level of consciousness, the consequences are much more serious. And the more aware a person is, the more will the more serious will be the consequences of ignoring the things you are aware of. As you grow, as you become more aware, you are expected to behave differently. Again, using an example of a child, it is one thing to spin around until you are dizzy, then drive a trike, but it's another thing for a teenager to get drunk and drive a car. You are spiritual adolescents right now, which means what? Oracles are really only 100% dependable in the hands of a true teacher. Because a true teacher is clear, and because he will sense if the oracle is being tampered with by dark outside forces. Of course, they can give anyone good, accurate information. But you can never be certain of the accuracy unless you are enlightened. In fact, most oracles were invented by true teachers, for true teachers. They were never intended for those whose separate selves and subconscious programming would confuse the answer. Why would a true teacher use one since they are already enlightened? For a true teacher, an oracle is a quick and easy substantiation of their own inner voice, a sort of second of opinion, double check system. But for an average person who is not yet clear, an oracle can be confusing at times, usually when the separate self has something at stake. For instance, many times I have seen a person get such an incredibly clear and specific reading from an I Ching that most people could not possibly misinterpret. Yet the person is confused and misinterprets it anyway, because their separate self doesn't really want the truth to be known. To give a personal example, when I was avoiding finding my true teacher but allegedly seeking my true teacher, I used the I Ching to ask if I should speak to him and if he was my true teacher. The Ching would come up with something like perseverance furthers. To get the great man To see the great man brings good fortune and success. Yet I'd read that and say to myself, I don't get it. What does this mean? What should I do? I got about 50 readings like that when I was trying to avoid finding my teacher. I kept asking because I was letting my selfish separate self pull the wool over my eyes. So I figured that at some point the odds alone would make it give me the answer my selfish separate self wanted to hear. But I fooled myself into thinking I would just do it one more time just to be sure. When I was really looking for a way out, I was lucky that it wasn't being influenced by dark forces. But I guess the environment I was in and my destiny sort of protected me against that. Also, the I Ching will stop you at some point by actually giving you a reading that says that there is no point in giving information to an impertinent fool, and that someone who keeps asking the same question over and over again is an impertinent fool. Of course, that is a blatant example, but whatever your separate self is making you confused about, will usually not be remedied by information from an oracle or channel. Oddly enough, I had done the same thing. I did it before I asked Zayn if he would be my teacher. I told Raj, I told Raj about my readings during one of my courses with him. I kept asking the Ching about finding a teacher, and I keep getting more confused. It always seemed to help me understand the changes I was going through or needed to go through. I'm not even sure it's working for me anymore. He said, those who really want to spiritually evolve should work to change in such a way that they become more directly in touch with pure information from their inner being. If they have previously relied on oracles and channeling, they are expected to forego that in favor of a true teacher and training to manifest their own inner being. So, how do you make the changes that will allow you to get the information more directly from your inner being? I asked impetuously. So, you aren't even see, you aren't even hearing me, clarifying it to you in person, let alone your oracle. Again, that's where a true teacher comes in. A teacher both gives you the keys to changing and manifesting your inner being, and keeps reminding you to use the keys when your separate self has steered you off track, which it puts a great effort into. Plus, the teacher is a clear reflection of your own inner being. Thus, being in the teacher's presence helps you get more and more in touch with your inner being, both by virtue of being consistently exposed to it and being made aware of the inner information, and by contrasting the truth and light of the inner being against your separate self's negative subconscious programming, mind games, deceit, and illusions. As you know, the story ends well. As we said earlier, channeling or going to a channel reinforces mental programming that your own inner being is not great and or is not directly accessible, and that you cannot change and manifest your own inner being in your life. This holds true whether or not a person is actually channeling a disincarnated being or just their inner being and subconscious. If the channeled information is telling you that you are a light worker and can manifest God, the very process of going to or doing the channeling is restricting you from doing that and being that. Thus, it actually creates a spiritual limitation. What a marvelous circular trick of the separate self. You can see your own tail in front of your nose. You can almost touch it. But you forever chase it and never get it. How does this work? I asked Gabriel one day as I was using the I Ching in the library. You know, in the old days, an oracle was often an actual person. Now they call them mediums or channelers. But whatever you call it, the motivation to channel or to go to a channeler is the same. And it is self-defeating. It comes from a subconscious and conscious belief that your own soul, your own inner being, is not so great, or at least not as great as the oracle, or the person who is being channeled and listened to. That weakens your own contact with your inner being, your own real contact with God. And every time you do it, that belief is reinforced. It also reinforces the belief that you must get the information from someone or something else. But the process does not do anything to directly change you in a way that will really put you in touch with your own inner being, or make the change in which you become a vehicle for manifesting your own inner being and God in your life all the time. This belief, which is being reinforced, thus affects your programming and keeps you spiritually chasing your tail and continually limits your spiritual self perception. You should not place such limitations on your outlook about yourself, young son, about your own spiritual greatness, or you will not grow to manifest God. But those limitations are only what you self impose, only what you believe and how you act, regardless of whether or not you have developed or manifested your own being. It is still the great one. The inner being is God, is universal consciousness, and is thus the highest possible awareness and source of information that can be channeled. And remember, all inner beings are one. Period. Your inner being is every bit the same as the likes of Buddha, Saint Germain, etc. You have no idea yet, but your potential is every bit as great. The only difference is that the great saints and sages choose to manifest their inner being. Did you ever hear of Jesus or Saint Germain channeling someone else? Why not? Because they didn't do it. And likewise, they don't allow themselves to be channeled. We'll explain that reason. We'll explain the reason for that later. They choose the traditional path and learning from living masters as you have. They choose that instead of channeling information from other beings or consulting channeled information. Just think about it honestly and remember your own soul is better than the many disincarnate lower astral beings that may want to possess a human and are being channeled. It's just up to you to manifest your inner being. Here is another of the chinks in channeling's armor. Have you noticed that channeling other beings, including the channeling of ascended masters, often seems to bring forth not just the inner being, but the individual self and the personality of the channeled being? So even if it is real, the information is filtered through the being's personality and self. And then it filters through the self of the channeler, and then finally through the self of the listener, who further filters the information through their own self's programming. At best, then, by the time your self is done with getting the information, it's highly unlikely to be anything that will directly or truly threaten the selfish separate self. And that is what the spiritual path is all about: the death, the surrendering, and rebirth of the separate self as a servant to the universal will. That is the key to true change, to becoming what you really are, to manifesting your inner being, your God that is within you. Good information and knowledge will do Good information and knowledge will not do it for you, regardless of how good that information is. And for the information you really need, why use channeling when you can access untainted information from the highest source, your own inner being? You are great. You are a great soul. Yes, you. Again, channeling doesn't put you through the changes that having a true teacher does. The kind of changes that will make you one with your inner being, one with the ascended masters, one with God. Some people are under the assumption that some of the great psychics of history were channelers, but with extreme rare exceptions, such psychics if they were of the light, only channeled their own inner being or higher self. And they too often warned against letting other entities come through you or misguide you, and of the dangers and damage such possession poses. The greatest of such psychics were in fact children of the Law of One, even some who were not consciously aware of it, and were actually in the service of the One and the Grand Master. These psychics use the incredible wellspring of their inner being to tap into what is called the Akashic Records. Such activities and abilities were all from their own inner being, operating under the oneness and service of universal will, not by going to channelers or channeling disincarnate entities, with very, very rare exceptions necessitated and controlled by the hierarchy. The person who wants to become a true teacher and works consciously and directly with spiritual seekers must also strive to integrate the inner being with the conscious and subconscious mind and manifest it in their life through body and mind. When this finally occurs, there is not conflicts or walls between the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the inner being, universal consciousness. Thus, there is also harmony between the conscious beliefs, subconscious programming, and the universal truths. The ancient teachings of Atlantis, as well as the more modern ones of the Atlantean children of the Law of One, all warn of the risks associated with possession, which are great indeed. Most people don't think about channeling this way, but the truth is, channeling is just a nice word for possession. And people need to keep this in mind and keep in mind the possible perils. In a spiritual and astral sense, possession is like being raped. The being who is channeled comes from the astral realms. And when another being possesses someone else's body and mind, it damages the host astral body, astral defenses, and actually weakens the strength of will, much in the same way that allowing yourself to be hypnotized weakens the will. That doesn't apply to self hypnosis or hypnosis by a totally trusted mate or spiritual associate. And every time you do such a thing, you weaken your own will and you subject yourself to damage spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically. You get holes in your circumvent force and auras, and dark creatures can attach themselves like astral leeches. Again, the fact is that channeling is a very nice euphemism for possession. Euphemism for possession. And no matter what good works come through during a channeling, you don't know who is really doing the possessing, which means you can't be sure of the motives behind it, and thus you can't really depend on the information. And it's one thing to listen to good words, uplifting messages, etc., but honestly, aren't there plenty of other sources to get such things without possession being involved and without subsequently taking the unnecessary risk involved? You know there are, but these are strange times, and instead of running to the nearest exorcist when someone is possessed, people often pay money to listen to someone who's possessed or try to become possessed themselves. How many people would be as interested in channeling as they are if it was called what it really is, possession, instead of using the euphemism channeling? Hey, we bought tickets to a seminar tonight so we can listen to some disincarnate entity who is possessing the body and mind of a young woman and learn how to let someone possess us too. It doesn't sound quite as nice as going to a channeling seminar anymore, don't you think? If channeling has had a good place in your life, fine, but it may be time to grow further. Just reading this is placing greater responsibility on you becoming more spiritually mature. A true teacher knows all of this. And instead of channeling, he gets the separate self out of the way and manifests the inner being. And a true teacher is there as a tool for you to develop, access, and manifest your own inner being. What could be higher, more pure, and safer than channeling, manifesting your own inner being? And it is likely that you who are reading this should be a true teacher yourself someday. Hmm. God only knows. There is certainly a need for more. And in the future, the need will be even far, far greater. But you won't become a true teacher by merely listening to spiritual information, good or bad. Here are some final words from my discussion with Zain about mediums and channeling, possession. Now, possession would be one thing if the only thing would possess a that would possess a body were high consciousness, saints, or the like. But there are many beings dwelling in the lower astral realms that cannot get a body and want one badly. And if they are not using an attractive disguise and lies to get themselves invited into a body by a voluntary medium, they will work on getting through other people, those who have weak astral defenses. Some of these astral realm dwellers are the spirits of disturbed humans who are between lives. Some are insane. Some are mass murderers, torturers, and cruel rapist warriors. And these deceitful, degenerate entities lie easily and well and are happy to make up a good story too. Then there are disincarnate demons also. All the ancient teachings, including those of the children and their branches, tell us to avoid possession and channeling and not to possess, to be channeled once ascended or between lives. And if you consider it thoroughly, it's not hard to figure out that real ascended masters don't want to be channeled. Think about it. Put yourself in an ascended master's sandals for a moment. You have worked hard on earth, suffered greatly, paid your dues, and then some. You have finally earned and chosen leaving this painful place to exist on a higher paradisical plane. You live and work in new ways on new planes. You know there are other masters on earth to take care of the needs of the spiritual seekers, and they are in touch with the inner beings as you, but they can do a better job for those on earth because they are still on earth in the flesh. You know you can't tell anyone on earth anything that isn't already there for them to hear, or that they can't get from a living master. And these living masters are already guided by you and your kin. They can answer any question and give any guidance anyone could possibly need on the earth. If that was you who had finally decided to go on, would you want to have to go back to the earth plane into a body and possess someone when there is no need because they are being taken care of already? Why would you? In fact, when you look at it objectively and you understand all that I just said, wouldn't an ascended master that had just wouldn't an ascended master that just had to throw in their own 2 cents by possessing someone be a little bit egoed out or off? Leave them be. Ascended masters have chosen to leave the earth plane and are working on totally different levels and realms. And they don't want to deal directly with any beings here anymore, other than their hierarchical linked masters. And they know it is not necessary for them to do so because they know they are masters on earth who are in the proper place. The true teachers that have chosen that duty and have the proper and full ability to deal with those who really want spiritual help and information. So, if you are channeling or listening to someone who is, think carefully about who or what is really being channeled. Regardless of who or what they claim to be, here is an excellent example. Let's say you need a heart operation. You need a surgeon. You find a stranger along the side of the road who claims to have been the great and powerful royal surgeon of the court of Cleopatra, and who also claims to have the knowledge and skills of modern medicine. Would you invite them to open up your body and fix your heart even though they had no way to prove their claims and you had no way to check their references? Would you even listen to their information on how to do it yourself or ask them to guide your surgeon? Seriously, would you do such a thing? Of course not. Nor would you even hire someone to work at a convenience store or rent someone a house so casually. Well, your body is a house of sorts, and your mind builds and directs your life. And when someone channels, they are letting some disincarnate stranger, something truly unknown, enter them through the astral realms, access and take over their very body and mind to one extent or another, all without even an interview or checking on references. And when listening to channeled information, consider the truly unknown sources. Shouldn't it be listened to cautiously rather than reverently? Please think seriously about this. I have heard many people talk about channeled information like gospel, simply because it was claimed to have been channeled. They don't have an ounce of doubt or caution about the information, but it was channeled. It should be the other way around. Too many people who are cautious enough to not give even a clean-cut hitchhiker a ride in their car will gladly let some strange astral entity that wants to possess a living human take a ride in their very body and mind, or listen to the words of a strange astral entity as if they were from a well-known and respected holy man. Does that really make sense? Not to me, and it shouldn't to you. The teachings in this chapter have shown new light on channeling and revealed serious problems with it. If you have used channeling before and liked it, as many have, your ego will have something at stake here. And as does your selfish separate self, and accepting these truths may be a little upsetting. You may even blow me off at this point. But so it goes with truth and threats to the self. It had to be said, but please really think it all over and reevaluate your opinions with an open mind. Discovering new truths that allow you to grow more and go further on your paths is a good thing. We all must first let go of one shore in order to cross over to another. From Mother Sheba. Even from the days before Egypt, the teachings of the Atlantean children of the Law of One regarding channeling have been simple and clear as the light. Only your own inner being should be allowed to possess your body and mind. And that means manifesting God. Your inner being is the Christ. Thus, it is Christ consciousness, God, the universal spirit. It should be integrated and lived, not just trans-channeled. Why channel anything else or anybody when you can be one with and manifest the universal spirit itself, your own part of God? What more could you possibly want to channel? What more information could you need to get than what you can from the Absolute? What could you possibly want that you can't get from the Universal Spirit? What clearer or better source of information could you have? Vishnu, another adept initiate, had this to say. If a teacher, master, guru, or whomever is legitimate, they are one with and manifesting their inner being, universal consciousness, God. Thus, true teachers only manifest their own inner being, God. In fact, you could say their very essence, their very life, everything about them is, in a sense, a constant living channeling of God. Thus, they have no desire or need to channel anything or anybody else. Think about it for a moment. What would God need to channel? Whereas the channeling of anything or anybody else must have consciousness limitations, and there could possibly be tainted motives, even if it is a true teacher. Excuse me, I said that wrong. Even if it is a true channeling. Infomercial channels. Finally, channeling can be very profitable and a great ego trip. A channeler can be a total fake. Many are. I know some of you think you would know if you were being conned by a channeling con artist, but it can be very difficult to tell. The fact is, it is a con artist's entire job to be totally believable. Their job depends on it. That is how they make their living. Other than being very in touch with your own inner voice, you can easily buy into a con. It's only a bad con job that you can really detect. If people could really tell when they are being conned, there wouldn't be so many cons around in so many different forms. Changing channels. In summary, channeling anything or any beings other than your own inner being can only be of lesser vibration at best. So why run the risks? Why risk listening to a channeler or letting these astral entities channel through you when you can be in touch with your own inner being? Nothing can be pure until the vessel is pure. You or your channeler would need to be an enlightened being for the channeling to be totally accurate. And if that is the case, you don't need channeling anymore because you already have the information you need. Thus, entities from the higher realms and those of the hierarchy will not channel through anyone. Ascended masters did not channel their entities when they were alive, and they certainly aren't going to do it through anyone else now that they are gone. They know the realities of such things, and they know that you should follow the same paths as they did. They want you to achieve universal consciousness yourself by going through the proper channels. They know you need an in the flesh master, true teacher, who can inspire you, break through your selfish separate self's illusion and blocks, and put you in touch with your own inner being. So you can manifest the parts of you that is God consciousness. So, if you are not yet manifesting your own inner being, find a true teacher that directly represents your inner being in thought, action, and word, and who can help put you directly in touch with it also. Why channeling? One time I asked Zaim about why someone who would even do channeling in the first place, considering the better options for getting information. Channeling, using a channel for spiritual information or following ascended masters, is far easier than going through the changes that are necessary to achieve true spiritual enlightenment. Yet it allows people to feel like they are doing something spiritually, learning, teaching, making spiritual progress in some way. And this can be true during certain periods of a person's spiritual path. There may also be some good spiritual information coming out of it, which reinforces this feeling. The separate self is happy to support this activity and let you feel spiritual, as long as you don't go any further and do something that threatens its power and position. That's because while you are feeling spiritually pacified, you are simultaneously avoiding a real teacher, thus avoiding the separate illusion busting and ego busting of the separate self that it absolutely needs if you are to gain your own real spiritual consciousness, universal consciousness. What an ingenious deception. Thus it fools many people and becomes a major diversion, a side trip trap. But we must live and learn. Again, the true reason behind why most people do channeling or follow the ascended masters may not even be what they think it is. To be spiritual or to get real spiritual information. It is part of an elaborate trick of the separate self designed to keep itself in control of your life rather than letting your inner being get control. Be a true channeler. Change, transcend the selfish, separate self, and begin to channel your inner being. Okay, that's the end of chapter 14 in the reading of The Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being you, for being here in this time, for listening to your inner guidance to receive this information. How cool is that? So, until next time, we'll be starting off chapter 15 at page 228. Thanks again.